Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to talk about three of what I feel are some of the most underrated of the very rare uniques in Path of Exile during the Harvest League. And so I want to state first up that this is probably not a video aimed at people who are solo self-found players. These items are extraordinarily rare. They're just not as expensive as they might have been in a lot of other previous leagues. So, the first one that I want to talk about is the Taming. The Taming is a unique ring that is acquired by turning in to a vendor 3 different special rings. So if you go to a vendor and you sell them Beric's Grip, Beric's Pass, and Beric's Respite all at once, you will receive an unidentified version of the Taming. The Taming is a prismatic ring. It's a unique prismatic ring, and it has a couple of mods that make it one of the most impressive damage dealing rings if you are playing a build that can inflict freezes, shocks, and ignites on enemies. Now, there's a couple of things that makes this a bit better than it's been in the past. And the first thing that I want to call your attention to is the passive node available on Cluster Jewels Sadist. Now, Sadist is a fairly rare jewel that is available on a lot of various elemental themed cluster jewels, and it gives you 15% increased elemental damage if you've chilled an enemy recently, 25% if you've shocked an enemy recently, and 20% if you've ignited an enemy recently. So if you're dealing all 3 of these ailments to an enemy, then you're looking at 60% increased elemental damage. So needless to say, the Sadist is extremely strong as a passive notable skill on your tree. And as I say, it's available on cluster jewels that are elemental themed. So that is something that makes the Taming much better than it's been in the past. 20% increased damage with hits and ailments per freeze, shock, or ignite on an enemy. Now this means you can get 60% increased damage from this line alone. You won't get this on your first hit. Your first hit on an enemy, generally they will have none of these ailments on them. But if your first hit inflicts all 3, then your subsequent hits will all get this 60% increased damage. Now 60% increased damage is nothing at all to sneeze at. That is a lot of damage, but that's not all the Taming does. So the Taming provides 20 to 30% plus 8 to 10% on the implicit. So a total, even assuming you don't divine this perfectly, let's say that you've got 28% as your explicit, you can certainly easily bless this perfectly to get 38% to all elemental resistances total. That's quite useful defensively. It's not as good as a defensively oriented ring, but it's pretty solid. Then we have 30% increased elemental damage. Wow, that's nothing to laugh at, especially when it's stacking with this 60% here. This conditional 60%. Then 10% chance to freeze, shock, and ignite, and 30% increased elemental damage with attack skills. There is a lot of damage on this item. But the other thing that needs to be said about the Taming is that almost every damage dealing mod on it, every damage dealing mod on it, is amplified by Turbulent Catalyst. So with Turbulent Catalyst, what you're looking at here is 24% increased damage with hits and ailments per freeze, shock, and ignite on an enemy, up to a total of 72% if the enemy's got all 3 of them on it. Then 36% increased elemental damage, then 36% increased elemental damage with attack skills, and 12% chance to freeze, shock, and ignite. Needless to say, this is a ridiculously powerful ring. Now, in a lot of previous leagues, this ring has been very expensive. When I say very expensive, I'm not talking in the 20 exalt range, but I'm talking in the sort of 3, 4, 5 exalt range. So anywhere from, depending upon the value of exalts in that league, anywhere from 500 to 1,000 chaos orbs. At the moment though, you can actually pick up a copy of the Taming for yourself for a much lower sum. So this 50 chaos orb one is probably someone that's taking the piss. But as we go down the list, you'll see there's a lot of them available in the sort of 80 to 90 range. So the Taming is a lot cheaper than it's been in the past. The sources of the Taming, if you're looking to get one yourself, Going to need a Beric's Respite, which is the rare component ring. You need to sell all 3 of the Beric's rings to a vendor in order to get this item. So you need to turn in Beric's Respite, Beric's Pass, and Beric's Grip. And these are considerably different in rarity. There's a couple of ways you can get them. The Valkyrie Divination card is one option, and this drops from Rogue Exiles all over the game. Additionally, you can get Beric's Respite, the rare one, from the Spark and the Flame Divination card, which drops on 2 of the most open maps in the game, so Atoll and Plateau. Or alternately, and the way that I would suggest getting this is just simply buying it from another player. But yeah, I think that the Taming is an extremely good ring. The only thing it's missing is life, because it does have a lot of resistances on it for a ring that is primarily about inflicting damage to enemies. It's missing life, but if you can manage that by perhaps changing your cluster jewel setup to provide you with life and chaos resistance, then the fact that you're wearing this ring that provides neither life nor chaos resistance isn't that big a deal. So yeah, I think this is the first one that I want to suggest as an underrated. It's a genuinely rare item, but it's quite cheap at the moment. So the second item I want to suggest is Zerphi's Heart. I've talked about this item before. It's one of those sort of pet favorites of mine. This is an amulet that does everything. So it has a very real drawback. The first drawback that it's got is that it's extremely rare. The source of this is that the only way that you can get this in normal gameplay is either through a genuinely rare divination card, the Life Thief, or alternately through the Temple of Atsuadal. You need to get one of the rare sacrifice vials and then get a tier 3 sacrifice room. All of these are very uncommon things to get, and that's why, again, this is very much not a solo self-found friendly item. However, what Zerphi's Heart will give you is pretty considerable. So first up, it gives you a solid chunk of chaos damage. Now, when an item says that it adds chaos damage, this adds that damage to your spells and attacks. For your spells, it is then modified by the spell's damage effectiveness. So for a spell like Fireball, that's a slower cast, you'll get a large percentage of this. I think from memory, Fireball is 240% of this mod, whereas for a much faster spell like Ball Lightning, you might only get 35% of this per hit. But this is a large amount of chaos damage. Next up we have the drawback. Items and gems have 50% increased attribute requirements. And for what it's worth, if you want a little bit of a laugh, Intrinsic Catalyst will actually increase this to 60%. So don't use those. So this essentially means, for most people, you're going to start to need 250 to 270 in your lower attributes for a lot of classes, for a lot of builds. This is a genuine, real cost. It's something that you can mitigate somewhat by anointing Zerphi's Heart to have something that fixes up your weaknesses with your attributes, but it's going to have a serious opportunity cost. You're going to have to fix this, and it's going to hurt. Next, we have this line: chaos damage can ignite, chill, and shock. Did I mention this works well with the Taming? The Taming, whilst it won't get as much as you would like from the chill, because you haven't frozen the enemy, you've only chilled it, it does turn on this very significant damage dealing line on the Taming. So that's a huge benefit. But chaos damage can ignite, chill, and shock is really significant if you can set up your character to deal chaos damage with hits. There's a number of ways to do this. One powerful way is the Trickster's node that provides a large chunk of elemental damage added as extra chaos, or sorry, non-chaos damage added as extra chaos. Additionally, you can use the added chaos damage support or awakened added chaos damage support, or alternately, you can simply go for a skill that deals outright chaos damage. There's not very many of those. But generally speaking, this is a powerful mod. But this is the kicker. The reason you even consider Zerphi's Heart: gain Soul Eater for 20 seconds when you use a Vaal skill. So every time you set off a Vaal skill, what this is going to do for you is it's going to cause every enemy that you kill for that 20 seconds. Instead of providing you with a new Vaal Soul, it will instead give you 5% attack speed, 5% cast speed, 1% character size, and 1% move speed. These can stack, and they can stack to ridiculous numbers. This used to only be 10% back a few leagues ago. The last time I ran Zerphi's Heart on a build was back in Legion League, and at that point Zerphi's Heart was only 10 seconds, and even then it felt amazing. It does prevent you from recharging your Vaal Souls for future Vaal skills, so there is a very real drawback to it, but this is one of those mods that has to be seen to be believed. I've got to say, if you've never run with Zerphi's Heart, give it a shot. It's a hell of a lot of fun, especially the ridiculous movement speed your character can get, but additionally the cast speed that you get and the attack speed that you get just feels amazing when you're mapping. The other thing that I think is really good with Zerphi's Heart is a Vaal skill that can store up to 2 or more uses. The one that comes to mind for me is Vaal Ground Slam, because it is simultaneously a very powerful skill and also a skill that benefits a lot from having 2 uses. Now there's an interesting and tricky interaction with Soul Eater and Soul Eater restarting while you've already got it. Essentially, if you've already got Soul Eater running, using a new instance of Soul Eater has the worst possible interaction. So if you have Soul Eater started at 0 seconds, and then you start it again at 13 seconds, when you get to 20 seconds, you will lose all your souls. And then when you get to 33 seconds, you'll lose them all again. So in a lot of ways, this is the worst possible interaction. So you don't really want to try and stack 2 uses of Soul Eater, but the effect is so powerful that being able to use it on command and being able to store up a second use of it on command is worth that hassle. So yeah, Zerphi's Heart, really powerful item and really underrated. Like, this is the sort of thing that, given how rare it is, the fact that you can get it for 100, 120 chaos is really, really, really cheap. This is the sort of item that is comparable in rarity league-wide to ultra chase items like Badge of the Brotherhood, which is about 40 exalted orbs, or Headhunter, which is about 60 exalted orbs. It's not quite as ridiculously powerful as those items, but it's a sort of item that could easily be 10 exalts and be worth buying at 10 exalts. And fun fact, this item pre-buff, so back when it was 10 seconds, in the Incursion League, was the most expensive unique item that's ever existed in Path of Exile. I was aware of several of them selling for 3 to 4 Mirrors of Kalandra in that league. Now, it's not worth that now. It's a lot more common now that the Divination card exists, but that gives you a sense that the power is there. The last item I want to talk about is All's Uprising. Now, this has been the ultimate luxury upgrade for a lot of builds for a long time. This is an expensive item normally, but in the Harvest League, it's become a lot cheaper. So All's Uprising is interesting. The way that it rolls, there's a lot of different versions of this item, and they all have the same graphic, they all have the same name, they're all Onyx amulets. But there is a random choice that's made when you pick up this item that as to which aura it will be attached to. So you'll see that this one here is attached to Anger. Then there's a couple of stats on the item. This is the armor stat, the strength stat, and the nearby enemies have reduced stun and block recovery. These stats are determined by the color of the aura gem. So Anger is a red gem. So for that reason, red is strength aligned. You get strength, you get armor, and you get this debuff to nearby enemies stun and block recovery. If instead this had been Hatred chosen, you would get a dexterity themed bonus for each of these. So you get increased evasion, increased dexterity, and I'm trying to remember the other mod. I think it's a 25% chance for nearby enemies to grant an additional flask charge when killed. If it was an intelligence-based aura, you would instead get intelligence, you would get energy shield, and you would get some critical strike modifier that's pretty damn good. So those are the core mods, but the massive powerhouse is the fact that an entire aura reserves no mana. This is incredibly powerful. In a lot of previous leagues, any usable All's Uprising. So we're not talking about ones where, you know, you get unlucky and the role is purity of elements. You know, an aura that, although it does something useful, it's an aura that almost no one wants to use. But if you get a genuinely powerful aura like Anger, these have in the past been 10, 12 exalted orbs in a lot of leagues. Now that's still the case for Hatred, and it's still the case for Haste. Hatred and Haste, All's Uprisings, are very expensive in the Harvest League. We're talking 20 exalted orbs and more. But pretty much every other aura is much cheaper. Malevolence, I think, is 3 exalts. Anger, 2 exalts. All sorts of other good things. So essentially, what I would suggest you do is have a think on your character. If I was able to partially give up my amulet slot in order to get a free aura, what aura would that be? And just go and have a look and see, would All's Uprising be worth your while using? I think for most of you the answer will be yes. Of course, there will be people that get so much benefit from a different aura that you don't want to consider All's Uprising, and that's fine. But the other thing that this does is a lot of builds like to use Essence Worm. All's Uprising is like God mode version of Essence Worm. If you've got an Essence Worm with Wrath in it, have a look at what you could get by changing that ring to something different, and then replacing your amulet with a Wrath All's Uprising. I think you'll find that it will be something very, very, very powerful. Anyways, that's just 3. That is 3 genuinely rare but quite cheap. Well, at least All's Uprising, it's relative. All's Uprising is still an expensive item, but 3 items that are much cheaper in the Harvest League than they've been in the past, that I think are really, really underrated. Of course, me making this video might make some of those items more expensive than they've been. If that's the case and you miss out, sorry, but hey, life sucks. If you've got any comments or questions though, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there, and I hope you have a good one.